Hi, I'm Jo Sibley from MEI's Advanced Maths Support Programme. In the last video that I'm going to record in this series for the time being, I've put together a few things that you might want to think about when you're planning for covering school closure or college closure due to COVID-19. So a few things to think about for your management team or for your departments perhaps together. You're going to want to think about what system you're going to use, and you probably already have an idea of what you've got in-house or what's available to you. The videos that we've made in this series have used Big Blue Button as an example system, but I know that other places are using Zoom or Office 365 Teams, etc. So you need to think in-house about what system's going to work for you best. You might want to think about when the lessons are going to happen, and my suggestion, at least as a starting place, would be that students should expect to be having lessons at the same time that they would have been having them in the timetable if they were in school. I think that makes a good starting place. It means that students know when to expect roughly, and then if things need to be changed from there, at least you have a starting point as to when they would normally expect to be being taught by you. You might want to think a little bit about who they should be for. It's probably not going to be feasible to replace the timetable for an entire secondary school, for example, using the online environment with a very short notice period to be able to get set up. So you might want to think about how you prioritize the students that you're going to get these online sessions to. I know that a lot of schools and colleges are already thinking about how they might support their exam classes, particularly with revision sessions, etc. So that's something to consider. Also, it's worth considering which students it's actually feasible to support. Do you have resources available that would make it straightforward to be able to support a particular group of students? And if that's the case, then it's good to go in some cases for the easy wins in emergency circumstances. You want to think about who's going to run the sessions. Obviously, if teachers are going to be able to teach from home, then they're probably going to need to have at least a semi-decent access to broadband, and that may not necessarily be the case for all the teachers on your team. So something to think about in that respect. One of the suggestions that has been made, and this is something that we use with some of our online classroom sessions for the AMSP, where we have a large number of students in a group all at once in an online classroom. We've worked with groups of over 100 people in the online classrooms together. It can be helpful to have a team of teachers, or at least a pair of teachers, and sometimes that can be very reassuring. So if you've got teachers who are very new to using online classrooms, if you pair them up, combine their classes and pair them up so that one of them is perhaps delivering, managing the presentation and so on, and the other one is concentrating on the chat box and looking at student interaction, that can work really well. So that's something that you might want to consider. You want to think about how you're going to manage access to the system, and this very much depends on the systems that you've got within the school already. But if you haven't closed down yet and you're looking at what you might do to prepare for a close down, it might be worth considering whether your teachers have already access to email groups for their classes. So is it straightforward for a member of your staff to be able to send out a link to their online classroom quickly and easily? And if that doesn't exist at the moment, that might be something that's worth considering in your planning before you close down. The last one here, I've put a little note about SEND students, about safeguarding and about GDPR. We've talked a little bit in earlier videos about using webcams and so on, and there are definitely considerations that need to be taken into account here. I strongly recommend not using webcams from the student end at all, and to be honest, although I'm using a webcam here when I'm delivering these videos, generally speaking, when I'm using the online classrooms with teachers or students, I don't tend to use my webcam on the whole. I would rather that people don't see the clutter that's behind me. This is my office, which is relatively tidy, but when I'm working from home, there's a big washing rack behind me and various other bits and pieces of clutter that I don't want people to see. Equally, if I'm teaching from home, one of the big advantages is that I can do so in my pajamas, and I would prefer that participants in the session don't see that. So I don't tend to use the webcam on the whole for these sessions. It's also a good idea to keep webcams off in terms of broadband width as well, which we'll talk about a little bit more on the next slide. But it's easy in emergency circumstances to forget about some of these important things. So it is worthy of just noting that any emergency system that you set up needs to take into account safeguarding, GDPR, etc. Okay, so for teachers, if you're working in the online classroom, some ideas to help you get the best out of the medium, and how can you reduce the load on internet bandwidth to ensure that more students can engage. So the first question, well, this is very dependent on you, depends what your sort of enthusiasms and your skills are in the classroom, but do think about how you can do the minimum amount of work to be able to get maximum impact with your students, which sounds very trite, but what I'm thinking of is the online classroom is very useful for speedy interactions between you and the students, things that they can get over to you in the chat box, questions that they can ask you, and that often works very much better when the students have pre-prepared. So if they've been given material to work on beforehand that they then go through in the session, they can ask you questions about what they've studied. That can often be a better way to use the online classroom than a sort of direct delivery. It works really well for revision. It's less brilliant for direct teaching approaches. And remember that for those of you that are used to the classroom environment, this was a big adaptation for me, because you can't see the students' faces, you can't see if they're puzzled or worried or confused, etc. So do bear in mind that you're going to want to be watching the chat box really carefully to gauge their reactions, because that's the way that you're going to find out what they understand of what you've been talking about. And anything that requires a heavy emphasis on you being able to see their faces is clearly not going to work in this environment. So think about that when you're designing your lessons, when you're doing your planning. Think about ways that you could maybe add a polling question to the session, so that you can get quick answers, quick assessment of student understanding, and so on. And teach them early on when you're first doing your sessions with these students. Train them to react more than they would normally in the classroom, with lots and lots of verbal chat. Text chat and emoticons, if you have those available in the classroom you're using. Think about reducing the load on internet bandwidth. So we talked about not using video. Don't stream video through the online classroom system unless it's absolutely designed for that, which is quite unusual. Have students watch video beforehand and then come into the classroom and ask you questions about it. Bearing in mind that you'll have a wide range of students in your session with very differing types of internet access at home. We want to make sure that it's equitable for those students, that they get fair access to your classrooms if you are going to deliver this way. A couple of more things to think about, and I really hope that these videos will have helped with the points that I'm about to make here. So something, no matter how simple or informal, could be better than nothing. For some of these students, they're already anxious about incoming public exams. It may just be that even one revision session with you asking about topics that they're confused about could make a big difference to those students. And so my aim with these videos is to try and say, you don't have to do all the bells and whistles, you don't have to have fantastic technical skills. It's your subject expertise that these students need access to. So just pick up the basics with an online classroom, figure out even just how to talk to students and how to listen to their questions via the chat, and that could be all it needs to really make the difference for these kids. So finally then, please do talk to us. We're on Twitter. I run the Advanced Maths Twitter account, and we also have the MEI Maths Twitter account as well running. We're going to be using the hashtags TeachAtHome and TeachOnline in our Twitter accounts. So please do look out for those hashtags. And if you have thoughts about the videos or about using online classrooms to deliver to your students, then please, if you do feel you're able to, please use those hashtags when you tweet about it, because it would be great to be able to see what your comments are. I said that this is the last video I'm going to make for now, but if people ask me for videos on further topics, then I'm very happy to do that. So please let me know if those would be useful. You might want to think about using social media for your department and also for an actual social use. Our experience at MEI and AMSP, we have a lot of people who work at home already, and it can be quite an isolated experience working at home. Especially if you're used to the sort of hustle and bustle of an active school. I certainly miss the bells when I'm working at home, and need that structure to my day. So do think about perhaps using social media or online media to bring your department together. Keep talking to each other. I would strongly recommend that. It's amazing how quickly you miss that sort of structure when you're working at home. So I would encourage you to use online media to communicate with your colleagues as well. I hope you found all of that useful. As I say, if you have any other things that you would like me to record a video about, any other questions or queries, I would be delighted to hear from you. And I hope you find the medium useful, and that you're able to find time to deliver some of your lessons from home. Take care. Bye.